I started to think about the Earth's place in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe. I just found those concepts really mind-blowing. Obviously, I'm a Star Wars generation kid. I was lucky to scrape through school. I wasn't really thinking about any kind of entrepreneurial. I think thoughts are energy as well, and you can manifest those thoughts into reality. I think a lot of people, Kiwis in particular, need to do the OE, and then they come back and I think they appreciate New Zealand a little bit more. I named the company Avatar Web Promotions, the International Space Development Conference in LA in 2000, and people like Elon Musk were speaking, and I've actually bought a ticket with Blue Origin and looking to fly in May. Yeah, it'd be fantastic to experience zero gravity, and yeah, I've known a few people that have done those flights. We just completed that first stratospheric flight February 2025.
This is Mark Pavlikovsky, and welcome to the TechMates podcast, where my partner Henrik and I explore how Kiwi and Aussie founders are reshaping the future and what sets them apart. Henrik and I have been part of successful companies in Silicon Valley and Europe, and now bring that expertise to partner with entrepreneurs in Australasia. By sharing the personal stories of successful Kiwi and Aussie founders and how they got here, we hope to inspire you to dream big. This is TechMates, bringing an outsider's perspective to the stories of those daring to disrupt down under. Let's dive in.
Awesome, Mark. It's so good to have you on the podcast. Welcome to TechMates.
Great to be here, guys.
Yeah, so we have a true entrepreneur and a true pioneer on the podcast, which we're really excited about. You're a pioneer from the early internet business, let's say in the late 90s. You're a pioneer in the space industry, getting the first space vehicle to orbit from the Southern Hemisphere. And now you're working on a really, really exciting company, and we want to know all about that. As I told you earlier, the reason why we do this podcast is to inspire other Kiwi and Aussie entrepreneurs and people to get into entrepreneurship. So we'd love to learn more about your background, where you grew up, and what made you become an entrepreneur. So yeah, maybe we can start with your time in Christchurch. I understand that's where you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up, I was born in 1970, December 31st. Actually, Richie McCaw has the same birthday, but 10 years younger than me. That's my claim to fame.
Sorry, who is that?
Richie McCaw. He's a famous All Black captain.
Okay. Are you a big rugby fan?
Well, I sort of grew up on it. But yeah, I've had sort of phases of being interested, and yeah, always good to see an All Black game versus England or Australia or South Africa. So yeah, those big matches can be a lot of fun. But yeah, grew up in Christchurch, and back in the 1970s, 80s, growing up in Christchurch, it was kind of a tough town. It was a little bit grey and dismal, and wasn't quite the cosmopolitan experience that it is now. Yeah, no, it was an interesting place to grow up, but yeah, beautiful and has all the seasons. Bless you, Mark. I see you just sneezed there. So, great city. It's really got a fantastic vibe going on now. A lot of fantastic entrepreneurship and movement forward.
Interesting. I'm actually kind of surprised to hear you say that it was a bit grey and dull. Because when I visited Christchurch, it was probably like the only place in New Zealand that has this kind of very kind of old historic European vibe. Like a lot of the buildings are very kind of colonial era style buildings. And that kind of, I don't know, made me feel like, wow, this town has a lot of history, a lot of culture and kind of personality. But was that not how you sort of felt when you were growing up?
Yeah, I think it got a little bit grungy. There were problems with skinheads and racism and stuff like that, which wasn't that fun to be. It didn't make you really proud to be in the city, but we sort of grew out of that. I think before the earthquakes, there were a lot of old buildings and a lot of sort of segments of the city that were getting a little bit decrepit, and there wasn't any investment going in. So obviously the earthquakes have been really sad on the sort of human toll of what's happened. But there's always the other side of the coin, and all that infrastructure redevelopment has led to a city now that has been revitalized, and we've got all these billions of dollars that are poured into building up the city again and renewing the city. So I think there's that sense of, we got through the London Blitz type stuff, and now we're in that rebuild mode, and there just seems to be some really good energy around.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
What were you into as a child, so other than All Blacks?
Well, I remember doing a school project about the planets. And, that was back when there were 9 planets in the solar system.
That's the right number of planets, I think.
Yeah. Just as I started to think about the Earth's place in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe, I just found those concepts really mind-blowing. How big is infinity? How long is eternity? And all that kind of stuff. But, when you think about the scale that the galactic scale, the universal scale. It's just incredible. And I just really love those concepts. And obviously, I'm a Star Wars generation kid. I grew up with those amazing films, and I really love Alien. That movie Alien, I think is my favorite because it's got that gritty realism. A lot of those sci-fi flicks, you never see anyone going to the bathroom or eating. But you look at the Alien movie, they're all around the table, food after, they're obviously looking really bad. They're having cigarettes, getting through their day the best that they can. And I think, that's what the future of space is going to be like. It's not going to be, lightsabers and Yoda. I mean, I think it's, really you're going to be mining, doing real tangible stuff in the solar system. And I think New Zealand could be a big part of that.
That's cool. And did you read any books? Like, so it sounds like you watched a bunch of movies and shows, but did you read any books that inspired you?
Yeah, I read a lot of sci-fi. That's my favorite kind of genre to read, relaxing at night. And I think, a lot of those sci-fi books, they really stimulate you. And a lot of them are really social commentary on whatever's going on around that time or has just before. So, yeah, I think it helps you to kind of think outside your little sphere of your daily life and sort of put yourself into different contexts. So I find them quite mind expanding. Yeah, a lot of great books around.
What were some of your favorite books then and now?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of look at, Arthur C. Clarke's 2001. There's some pretty cool concepts in there, and yeah, there's just a whole range. Awesome. Scott Card did some really good books. Yeah, just yeah. I don't,
Is that Ender's Game?
yeah, Ender's Game. I was really disappointed in the movie. I thought they really bombed that one, but
Oh, okay.
the book.
Did you read all the? 'Cause there's actually a bunch of other books around, like Under Shadow and a bunch
I
of
read
other.
I read all those. Yeah,
And then there's like this whole like backstory, actually back history that like of books that I didn't realize it had. Kind of reminds me of. Did you read Star Wars? Because actually Star Wars has a bunch of that as well, right?
yeah. I didn't read the Star Wars books, no, but yeah,
How about Isaac Asimov?
yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Yeah.
Foundation, the Robot series.
Yeah. No, that's pretty cool. And the rules that they had, the laws that they had, and yeah, just how they sort of chuck in weird little scenarios helps make you think in different ways.
Yeah, that's cool.
So how did you think about your career when you were a kid or when you were a teenager? Did you think about entrepreneurship at all, or what did you think your future was going to be like?
I was lucky to scrape through school. I wasn't really thinking about any kind of entrepreneur at all. Yeah, I mean, I sort of had fairly, my dad was a welder and we didn't have too many luxuries around our house. My mother knitted me jerseys and I was always a bit jealous that the kids next door got sweaters from the shop. But so, yeah, it was sort of kind of hard times. Yeah, I mean, at the time, I sort of went through a whole bunch of different phases, and I actually thought I might be a chef. I like the idea of being a chef and traveling around the world and just seeing a bit more of the universe. I just wanted to get out of New Zealand and see a bit of the world, and I thought that would have been a good way to go.
And that's what you did, right? So you left New Zealand after school to travel a little bit, I read somewhere.
Yeah, yep, yeah. I think yeah. And then I went to university, and the last year I kind of did a few more sort of creative subjects. And my girlfriend at the time, she was off to university doing hydroelectric engineering. And my big aspiration at that time was to be a Buddhist monk in Tibet. So I thought that would,
Oh wow!
yeah. She dropped me like a hot potato.
Yeah, you've got this sort of like very like Zen kind of peaceful vibe around you. I can sort of see it.
Thanks, Mark. But yeah, I was quite interested in soul travel. The out of body experiences and all that. I just thought that'd be kind of a really cool thing to delve into. And mind powers. I've read a lot of books about powers of the mind and stuff that you can do. So
Is any of that like real or true, or does it work?
yeah, I think there's certain things that you can do. Yeah, actually, one book I read was actually called Mind Power by John Kehoe, and they're pretty hard to get those books now. But yeah, 1980s, he was a Canadian, went out to the forest and in the woods and spent time by himself to kind of think about some truisms in life, and I found that to be quite cool. And the reality is, I think if you're trying to get to the fundamental truth of reality of the universe, it's made up of energy, and that scientists are sort of digging deeper and deeper into that now. But I think thoughts are energy as well, and you can manifest those thoughts into reality. I think that's the fundamental. What do I believe that if you can, you can work on things and you can take an idea and you can make it real. That's
That's
what
cool.
Were you serious about becoming a monk during your university years?
Yeah, it was definitely on the cards. It didn't quite manifest itself. Yeah, that was the top of my job list, was to be a Tibetan monk.
Well, why?
Again, just I think that exploring the powers of the mind and soul travel and contemplation, and I think, like a lot of teenagers, a lot of people in their 20s, they're sort of searching a little bit for what's real in life. And yeah, I think a lot of kids grow up and they're like, "Is this it? I mean, this sucks."
Um,
It kind of takes a while to kind of break through that and find the things that excite you.
So you left university and then started to travel. Did you go to Tibet?
I didn't make it to university. No, I was at high school, and yeah, basically did a hospitality course, and then I worked in some bars and restaurants, and yeah, basically worked in London in an Irish bar in London for a year or so, and that was actually during the IRA attacks in London. So it was probably the safest place to be. But and then the first Gulf War started, so that was pretty heavy. People worried about what was in the Iraqi embassy, were there chemical weapons there or whatever. And yeah, it was a pretty crazy time to be in London and travel around Europe.
wow, wow. And so you were just sort of, were you like, I'm just going to take some time to just kind of explore Europe and just take kind of odd jobs as I'm doing that to support myself? Or was that kind of the
Yeah, I
idea?
just wanted to visit some countries and get a taste of the world. And yeah, so yeah, we got a van and traveled around Holland, Germany, France, made my way to Poland, which was pretty cool. And yeah, a few other countries. And then yeah, I sort of worked on a few farms over there in Germany, and ended up working in a vineyard down the southern part of Germany. And then my van broke down, so I had to kind of get back to.
So that was, I mean, so you were like 18. That was right around the time when the Soviet Union was collapsing, the whole like Warsaw Pact was kind of
Yeah, well, I was
leaving.
19. I was 19 in 1920 when I was actually in Europe. But yeah, it was basically just a few months before that it all sort
So
of.
did you see like the Berlin Wall kind of come down, or that was happening right at that time,
Yeah,
right?
it had to come down a few months before. Yeah, seeing going to East Berlin and East Germany and seeing the stark difference of reality between West and East was amazing. And then we actually met some Polish people in Germany, and I'd be playing my song. I actually had my guitar and backpack, and I was playing my song there. And they basically said, "I'll come back to Poland," and yeah, we ended up getting into Poland and having a great time there. And again, seeing those sort of Eastern Bloc countries, they were just so run down, and yeah, it was just a stark difference between West and East.
How did it compare to grungy Christchurch?
Yeah, made Christchurch look good.
Really? Wow. So was that change kind of like, I think you always need some kind of contrast, right? We kind of understand things in relativity is, I think. Did seeing kind of all that, did that give you a new perspective on New Zealand and Christchurch?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, a lot of Kiwis in particular, need to do the OE, and then they come back, and I think they appreciate New Zealand a little bit more.
Right.
And every time I come back, I mean, I love going to America and I love going to places, but every time I come back to New Zealand, it's like it's great. It's just a great place to live. But at the same time, I think New Zealand's just not on the radar of anywhere else. Right? I mean, in New Zealand, we think we're such a big deal, and we just keep thinking about New Zealand and all this stuff. But no other country's thinking about New Zealand.
Right. Right. So when did that change? Kind of seeing, I don't know, because that was a pretty historic period in the history of Europe, and you were kind of right in the epicenter of that. Did that change your perspective on the world? Did that give you new ideas, desires, dreams, ways of thinking about the world?
Yeah, I think it expanded my perception on the world, and you have these experiences, and you meet people, and yeah, I mean, obviously there's so many similarities. People wherever you go, there's a lot of warmth and friendliness, and you've got other people hostile and keen to whites on it. There's a lot of similarities all around the world, but yeah, I think for me, it just helped give me a sort of rounded perspective on things.
So how did you, I mean, if I may say, you're old enough so that we can ask, how did you come across the internet? Like, what was the first sort of touch points with the internet and with computers?
Yeah, well, after busking around Europe, and I came back to New Zealand, and then I went to Australia for a little while, and then I was in New Zealand, and basically I was on the dole playing in a rock band, and after about 6 months,
You run the what?
the dole. So basically, unemployment benefit back then, it was called the dole. So basically, I was a professional musician in the sense the government paid me to stay at home and be a musician. So yeah, I was just sort of playing guitar, singing, and in this band. And essentially, after 6 months, I became eligible for a job subsidy, and I had three choices actually. One was being a carpet layer, one was working in a record store, and the other one was working at this internet company back in 1994. And that was before, I knew what the internet was. And in fact, my friends were teasing me. It's like, oh, an internet company, it sounds so stupid. Um, and I really loved the idea of working in a music shop because I was a musician, right? That was sounding pretty cool. But yeah, there was just something intriguing about working at this internet company. And yeah, luckily I chose that option.
What was the company?
The company was called Planet, and it was the first or second internet provider in Christchurch. So yeah, basically it was an internet provider, and it was a whole lot of computer geeks there that were really bright. And yeah, I ended up just being put on the front desk because I had a background in hospitality. I was sort of dealing with the people side of things, dealing with the paperwork, the contracts, and giving them demos on how to use the internet.
Oh, interesting. Why would people want internet back then? Like, how did you guys sell it? Because at the time, like, there wasn't a lot of people on, right?
Yeah, well, back then it was just email. People had CompuServe accounts, and when I started with Gopher, it was pre World Wide Web. You had just had Gopher, which is like a file sharing type system. Uh, yeah, and people got a real kick out of just getting access to these weird databases and just exploring things. So yeah, it was real old school.
What did you discover? What did you learn from that experience?
That there's a lot of really bright people in the world, and yeah, I was just uh, doing the basic customer service stuff, and it just blew me away the talented people that built the internet in those early days. And you don't really get the vibe anymore, but back then they were the sort of real alternative geek type personalities where they wanted to make information free and they wanted to have liberty, and basically it was anti-commercial. And for quite a few years, they sort of held back the corporates and held back the commercial side. But then obviously it just became a tsunami of commercialism, which took over the internet. But it was quite amazing being involved with the internet industry in those early days.
Interesting. I mean, you think you've seen a lot of that with the whole crypto thing, right? I don't know if you follow that at all. I'm kind of interested in Bitcoin or any of that. In the early days, that was kind of how it all started as well.
Exactly, yeah. There's definitely remnants of that around, but most people wouldn't be even aware that there was like a battle between commercialism and the geeks.
What does that mean? The battle? Because to me, they all kind of like at this point now is just like you have Elon Musk is like the archetype who's just like the richest man of the world and also a geek, right? They're like the same. So when you're saying there was a battle, what does that mean? How did that look?
There were just sort of people that were very keen not to let it kind of slide down the commercialism. It's like, they wanted to share information freely. They didn't want to have to pay for everything. They wanted to kind of freely share open source ideas, software, and tools,
Mm,
and, help each other. It was more of a sort of communal approach to the world. So, yeah, I think we have lost something by uh, going down the pure commercialism route that we have. But at the same time, a lot of super cool stuff has been developed. So kind of hard to know. I mean, obviously, you need the money to give people a living to really build these amazing platforms and amazing systems.
mm.
But at the same time, people put their lives, hours and hours and hours into building these open source things just to help other people, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, so you spent a few years, I guess, in this company, and then how did you go from there? Like, did you already see the potential of the internet, and how did you think about your first entrepreneurial ideas?
Yeah, well, I sort of started to work in internet marketing. So really a lot of it was based around search engine optimization and just getting used to the basic concept of how those early search engines worked. And it was really, we've gone through a lot of iterations, from the early days, you just put keyword stuff and you could just basically put whatever keyword you wanted 100 times on your page and you'd come up number one in Alta Vista or whatever, it went from that to being what it is now, which is super sophisticated. But yeah, back then we didn't have just Google. There were about 10 different tools from, Alta Vista to InfoSeek to web crawler. There was all these interesting search engines that were out there that sort of did things in slightly different ways. I think, Alta Vista really dropped the ball because, the owners of that company didn't quite realize what they had. And obviously Google powered ahead and took the prize. But yeah, I started working in internet marketing, and yeah, I mean, on your entrepreneurial journey, you meet people at just the right time. I met someone that said, "Hey, I've started my business," and he was a real inspiration for me. And he said, "Hey, you could do the same." And just after a few months of being exposed to that, I thought, "Oh, hey, maybe I could develop an internet marketing company." And so I started playing around with it in 1997 and started the company officially in 1998. I think that was probably the first New Zealand internet marketing company, first search engine optimization company in New Zealand.
Wow. You started that?
Yeah. And I wanted a company that began with the letter A, because back then it was, directories were still important, and you don't want to be at the bottom of the list kind of thing. So I just started looking through the dictionary of, what's a cool word, and I named the company Avatar Web Promotions. Yeah. So then obviously the Avatar movie kind of made that word a little bit more popular. But back then it was about being a super user of a computing environment or a sort of virtual reality avatar of yourself. So I thought it was really apt as far as internet marketing.
That's clever. How'd that company do?
Great. Yeah, sort of paid a lot of bills, had a lot of fantastic clients, worked on thousands of websites. And around the same time, I set up a company with a couple of other guys, New Zealand Tourism Online. And that was basically a tourism directory. And we built that up to being the number one commercial tourism directory in New Zealand, and sold that to Telecom in 2006. That was, a whole journey. We started off pretty humble beginnings there and managed to basically get some really, really great successes. We were in the Fast 50 moving companies for a few years in a row, and we were the first internet company to win a tourism award, and had some really, really great successes. Luckily, Telecom, Yellow Pages, Telecom was selling Yellow Pages. It used to be called Telecom Yellow Pages, but basically we were part of that bundle, and so essentially Telecom paid us a bunch of money to take over the directory.
Wow.
So you were running these companies at the same time?
Yeah. There was another company as well called NZS.com, which was like a New Zealand Yahoo directory type model. So yeah, 3 companies I was running
at the same time.
Hmm.
How'd you do that?
Well, you don't do it yourself. You've got a team of people that are doing all the hard work. So yeah, just basically just leveraging and building the right models. Avatar was self-funding, Tourism Online became self-funding, and I think I guess that sort of goes into my entrepreneurial journey. I mean, I realized, from high school, I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. I've got to keep upskilling myself. And I think that's been one of my key advantages. I think a lot of people probably stop the sort of self-development. But for me, I'm on a drive to keep learning. So I'll read a lot of business books, a lot of books about, how I can get the best out of my day. And one of the courses I did in the year 2000 was the Entrepreneur Success Program. It was run by a couple of cool guys, and they had some really great insights. And one of the things that really resonated with me is to be an effective entrepreneur, you need to balance your health, your personal life, and your business life. And you look at so many entrepreneurs, and so often they're out of balance, where they've been divorced multiple times. They're really unhealthy. Their business might be flying, but those other 2 areas could be struggling a little bit. And I think to be a long-term successful entrepreneur, you've really got to live your life in balance. And that's something I strive to do.
That sounds like that sort of fit with your original sort of like thinking about the world and about sort of being at peace and understanding the deeper kind of meaning. Sounds like, did that sort of become your answer for you? Like, this is kind of like...
Yeah, I think balance is an important concept. If some people work super long hours and they're totally out of balance, that works for them. That's fine. If they can do that, that's just not my personality. I find I'm way more creative if I can give myself space. When I'm doing marathon running or whatever, or, walking in the forest. I think those times, those moments of creativity and insight are really important for me.
Yeah, that kind of goes against the current zeitgeist, right? I think like entrepreneurship, especially like sort of US focused entrepreneurship is all about, working really hard, completely neglecting other things that you do in life.
Yeah.
Maybe that's different in New Zealand and Australia compared to the US. What's
Oh,
your
there's definitely
experience?
people there. I mean, that's something Peter Beck is talking about at the moment, and I think he's strongly influenced by that US approach. But yeah, a lot of people burn out. Not many people can kind of do that Elon Musk level. And yeah, I mean, even then you could argue, maybe he's got a little bit too much going on, right?
Probably. Yeah.
um,
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, I think there aren't many people that can operate really effectively for long periods of time, being all in on something. You've got to have that break. If you look at Olympians, they sort of they need that downtime to repair their mind and body and soul or whatever.
And did you come to that realization? Were you feeling like burned out yourself? Like you're on three businesses. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had times, in my 30s where I would be working till 2 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, but when you're young, you can push it, have the caffeine in the morning, and you can do that. But yeah, I did get a few sort of repetitive strain injuries, from being on the keyboard so often and stuff like that. And I realized, I had to go to the gym, I had to do some exercise, otherwise I just can't type anymore. So yeah, I think you sort of hit the wall at some point and you realize, hey, I've got to change things. This isn't quite working for me.
Yeah, I think Mark, I would be interested in your experience, but moving to Australia and New Zealand, I guess, is definitely a different pace than what I'm used to in Europe and what you're probably used to in the US, right?
Yeah, it's a lot more relaxed here. Which I sometimes wonder if like that really hinders founders here from becoming all they could become and having their companies kind of grow as big as they could be. Just because, yeah, it's a much more kind of relaxed kind of baseline. At a baseline, I mean, there's definitely outliers, right? Because the baseline is just much more kind of, yeah, a lot more balanced, I would say. Which I
Yeah.
think, would you say that that's your experience as well?
Yeah, I think, you can still be really effective and be balanced. I mean, that's the goal, is to be the best version of you that you can be long term without hitting that wall. So yeah, I think, pushing yourself is still important. And if you are just working 40, 50 hours in your business, what's the best way to spend that 50 hours? What are the big rocks? Because I think a lot of people that are working crazy hours, they get stuck on doing stuff that they don't really do. They never actually stand back enough and actually see the big picture and think, actually, the biggest thing I need to do right now is chase that deal over here. And instead, you're doing a whole lot of other stuff that you could delegate to other people on your team. So for me to get that big perspective about the key stuff that's going on, that's what works for me.
Because there's a distinction between working in the business and working on the business, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, I think Kiwis probably need to push themselves a little bit more. But yeah, the key thing is making sure that they are productive and doing the right things, and making sure that they are outsourcing or delegating the stuff that they don't need to do. And it's something we all need to do every week. We all need to kind of have a fresh look at, it's just the best thing I could be doing right now for the business, and
Yeah.
it's an ongoing thing to keep reviewing.
Yeah, and I like what you say about, I guess, like everybody's different, right? There might be some people who can work 120 hours per week and, they can do the best they do, and others just need, their breaks. I think it's about figuring out what works best for each individual.
Yeah, you just got to find, what works for you. And, sometimes it can be demoralizing when you see these people that are just doing crazy stuff. And it's like, I can't do that. But, there's multiple roads. You find the template that works for you, and don't feel that you have to squeeze into some other template that is just never going to work for your personality, your lifestyle, your approach.
No, I just want to move on and go into the year 2006. You were selling the New Zealand tourism business. Were you still involved in the other two businesses, or was that kind of a break where you said, okay, now I'm going to take a step back?
Yeah, so I kept those other businesses going and actually doubled down on NZS. And yeah, we were getting some pretty good traffic at NZS. We got up to about 1 million page views per month. But then Google changed the model, so we just missed out by a year or two. That could have been a really successful business, but we just couldn't get the speed up to be self-sustaining on generating traffic. Yeah, Avatar was still trucking along into a few years ago, but yeah, in 2006, I bought a ticket with Virgin Galactic. So I basically had a bit of fuel in the tank, and I thought, okay, well, actually, back in 2000, as part of that Entrepreneur Success Program, one of the really powerful things they did on that program was to imagine you're on your deathbed, looking back at your life and thinking, what are you really grateful for that you achieved, and what did you miss out on? And basically, there's a whole lot of things that came out of that for me. But one of them was I wanted to go to space. So as soon as I had a bit of rocket fuel in the tank, and at the same time, Virgin Galactic were talking about the space tickets. So I went and bought a ticket with them, and this meetup was actually at the International Space Development Conference in LA in 2000. And people like Elon Musk were speaking, and I met Buzz Aldrin there, and super cool people. And they were talking about this new aerospace industry that was developing, but all of it was happening in the Northern Hemisphere, and maybe there's an opportunity in this part of the planet, this half of the planet, where New Zealand could get involved with the space. And so I started talking about that a little bit in the media, and Peter Beck heard about that and contacted me, and we started commercial operations of Rocket Lab in 2007.
Wow. And when you say you went on Virgin Galactic, did you actually, did you fly on a plane, or what was that?
Yeah, well, I signed up with them for their ticket to space, but they had a few issues, and it would have been delayed. That they have actually flown some passengers, but yeah, essentially they have been delayed. And so last year I cashed my ticket in, and I've actually bought a ticket with Blue Origin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And looking to fly in May.
This
Very
year.
cool.
Oh, wow, that must be a dream come true.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty exciting.
Have you done any of those? So you can go on like these planes that like do the up and down thing. Have you gone on any of those?
No, I never quite managed to do that, but yeah, it'd be fantastic to experience zero gravity. And yeah, I've known a few people that have done those flights. They sound like a heap of fun.
And what about skydiving?
Skydiving, yeah, done a little bit of skydiving. Amazing. Really love that. And yeah, I mean, it's a full on experience to jump out of a plane. And yeah, I loved it.
That's cool.
Have you ever done it, Mark?
No. Have you?
Yeah, I've done it. It's really exciting. I'd love to go on Blue Origin as well, but not there yet. Cool. So you met Peter Beck in 2006 after going to that conference, and you kind of had the same idea. Is that kind of how you got together? You were like, okay, we need to bring this into the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, well, I wanted to invest in a rocket company, and Peter Beck had a plan to build a rocket company, so it was kind of a pretty good match.
But you were not just an investor, right? You also kind of then went and worked in the company.
Yeah, I was a co-director. We'd have weekly meetings and go through things. Unfortunately, Peter remained based in Auckland, and I was in Christchurch. Unfortunately, logistics didn't work out quite as easy. But yeah, I think being based in Auckland has worked out well for Rocket Lab. But yeah, we were co-directors, and the first space launch happened in 2009. Fantastic to build that company to that point. And we had a few people on the team with Peter. They just did an incredible job. And Peter's just one of those people that just gets it done. He's a brilliant technical genius. And to see what Rocket Lab has become is amazing.
What can you tell us the story of Rock? How did it start? And at what point when you got involved, was it already around, or was it just an idea?
Yeah, well, Peter was working somewhere else, and he was sort of a weekend rocket builder, and did a lot of cool stuff in his spare time. And basically the investment that I introduced essentially enabled him to finish his job and focus full time on building a rocket company. And yeah, it was a great time to experience, to see what we achieved and what the team achieved.
How much did you? So you were the first investor in Rocket.
Yeah.
How much did you invest?
Well, I think I don't know if we sort of commercially talk about it, but yeah, I mean, it basically got us kicked off, and really, I think looking back, we were really trying to work out what are the sort of good revenue streams for this type of company, and I think we're a little bit naive about where we thought we could make that happen. Luckily, rockets just have that X factor, and in time, doors unlock, those opportunities unlock, and it's, it is kind of unusual where you build something and it's just so super cool that people want to get involved with it to some degree. But yeah, there are a lot of people that build stuff that don't really have a market, and you've got to really watch out for that. And there were a few years where it was lean. We didn't have the income that we needed to kind of support the team that we needed to get to that next step. And that's the other thing is, sometimes it just takes time to kind of build up those opportunities. You got to kind of work out, how long do you hang in there to make it happen, and when do you quit?
Yeah.
Really,
well, I mean,
sometimes
Elon's talked about that, right? Like, where at some point he was sort of had put all his net worth into SpaceX, and rockets kept blowing up, and like, he just had money for like one more launch, and if like that didn't go, then he'd be bankrupt, and you'd have a company that wasn't able to launch anything. And
Yeah.
I mean, but can you maybe set the context a little bit more? I mean, this whole idea of what was the idea behind what gave you guys I guess the confidence that this could be an industry, that this is something that a private company could do? Because at the time it was just governments that were launching rockets, right?
Yeah. Well, looking at companies like SpaceX, were proving that it could be done. You've got, NASA that's released a whole lot of that research material of, how to build the perfect rocket in the 50s and 60s. A lot of that information was available, and we could, use modern computing power, modern composite materials, etc., and do things way more cost effectively. So yeah, I think we were, developing something that was pretty cool, but it was about trying to find the right commercialization pathway, and it's always about trying to chase the money and chase the right money in the right direction.
What was the reaction of other people in New Zealand, other investors, during that time when you guys started and you were like, we want to build a space company in New Zealand? But how was that received?
Yeah, well, I think after our space launch, people started to take us a little bit more seriously. But, even before the space launch, it was really hard to get a corporate sponsor. I mean, no one wanted to put their logo on the side of a rocket that might blow up. And we went to a lot of the, top corporate people in New Zealand, and, the boards just didn't want to take that risk. And I think that sort of demonstrates a lot of the sort of conservative thinking that you get in New Zealand. To me, I mean, that would be super cool to be on the side of New Zealand's first space launch, and be part of that, be supporting that. To me, that's something that would be a great opportunity. But that sort of gives you an idea of the mindset of the time. Money could be hard to come by, and just back in those sort of 2000s, technical development was just a little bit different to what it is now. People are sort of seeing a lot more about what you can do in New Zealand. Now we have a great winemaking industry, boat building industry, filmmaking, aerospace industry. So I think we're sort of really proven to ourselves a little bit more of what we're capable here in New Zealand.
Interesting. And what were the big kind of challenges, I guess, early on? Like, was it engineering? Was it capital? Was it getting contracts? Was it figuring out who the customers were? Like, how did you kind of look at what the biggest hurdles were to like getting the next step? And how did you even think about like what the next step is? Because I know like there was at some point, I think Peter went and he was working a lot with defense at some point, and that was something you didn't want to do that much. So like, how did you guys strategize about like, where does this company go? What are the big challenges?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, companies need to follow where the money is. Initially we thought we could do commercial contracts and university payload contracts. The reality is, the military was where the opportunities were initially for rocket labs. It makes sort of commercial sense to go in that direction. And, at that stage, that wasn't something that I was that excited about. And I had a young family. I had a few other things that I wanted to do. So, 2011, I stepped out, and these days I'm a shareholder of Rocket Lab. Basically in sort of 2011 to 2018, I was working on some other non-profit type projects and trying to be there a little bit more for my family when my young kids were growing up, which was amazing to have that opportunity to be with them then. And 2018 is when I started my next aerospace venture, Kea Aerospace.
Yeah, tell us more about that. How did that come to life? When did you start working on the idea?
Well, I really wanted to get back into the aerospace industry and develop another super cool aerospace project. And I started to hang out at the University of Canterbury and talk to bright people out there, and started to talk to Dr. Philip Saltrop. And he was from Germany. He actually came from Germany because he saw the stuff that was going on with Rocket Lab. And we started talking about other ideas and stumbled across the stratospheric drone concept. As we sort of dug into it, we realized it's fantastic that it can solve a whole lot of really cool problems around environmental monitoring, disaster response, commercial applications. But at the same time, it had a really strong commercial pathway. So it just sort of added up to being something we were really excited about doing. And about 3 or so years ago, we got some funding in from an Austrian investor, and that funded the Mark 1 program, the Kea Atmos Mark 1, where we're building aircraft capable of getting to the stratosphere on a dawn to dusk type mission. We just completed that first stratospheric flight February 2025, and now we're starting the design process of the Mark II, which will essentially be able to stay up for weeks or months continuously in the stratosphere. And we've got some commercial customers with the Mark I, but the Mark II is really where the commercial floodgates open, and we've got a heap of really cool opportunities there.
Are they named after you?
No, so some other person in the company named it the Mark I, Mark II, so I was quite happy to agree with that.
And wait, so was your last name wasn't originally Rocket?
Yeah, I changed my name in 2000 back when in the internet days. Always had a love of sci-fi, space technology, and I thought it was a fun thing to do for my internet marketing and other kind of reasons. So it's kind of weird now that I'm president of Aerospace New Zealand and CEO of Kea Aerospace and go along to space conferences. It's a little bit surreal.
So wait, so you actually changed your last name before you invested into Rocket Lab?
That's right, yeah.
Wow. And so are your kids, so how did that work with your family? Did your wife change her last name, your kids?
Yeah, we've got a couple of little rockets and Miss Rocket there.
Wow. What did she think of that? Or did you change it before you met her? Or?
Yeah.
That's cool. And so with Kea, what was how'd you think about that kind of because your experience, I guess, was purely in sort of the internet stage, then you did Rocket Lab, and what made you were you still excited about space? And if you were, then why not start on the rocket company, or why not do satellites? Why? Because Kea, you're kind of putting up these planes that are just taking aerial photography of certain areas. So it's not really, it's sort of I guess higher than planes, but not really space, right? So why?
Yeah, initially we thought we'd try and leverage off the Rocket Lab capability and build some sort of space hardware. That was the kind of road that we were sort of digging around initially, but we sort of soon realized that New Zealand just doesn't have a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the investment capability that many other countries, cities around the world have. What we found really compelling about the stratospheric platform is you're 20 times closer to the ground than satellites. You can loiter over an area. Satellites, they buzz across. You need a whole fleet of them to give continuous telecommunications coverage. But essentially having an Earth observation platform means it can be really useful for continuous monitoring. So whether it's a fire or flood emergency like that, you can basically track infrastructure. If there's a storm, you can basically be flying above that storm and tracking what's going on, not using multispectral cameras, but using synthetic aperture radar. You can actually look through clouds and look at what's going on the ground. So it has some sort of unique advantages there. I mean, it could be a telecommunications cell phone tower in the sky, instead of 400 plus kilometers orbit, you're only at 20 kilometers. So it's way, way closer for telecommunications. Also, our first customer is actually doing upper atmospheric testing in the stratosphere. So there are three main areas really that we're looking at for revenue generation: Earth observation, telecommunications, and atmospheric testing.
So who would be customers for the Earth observation part of the business?
Initially, we're aiming to work with the New Zealand government, Australian government over the maritime domain. We've had a couple of ships that have sort of passed through between New Zealand and Australia from another country.
Is that China?
Yeah. And our governments have realised they don't actually really have very good capability to work out what activity those sorts of vessels are doing. And, the same thing's going on for illegal fishing, these billions of dollars that are being poured out of the Pacific Ocean by these illegal fishing boats and drug smuggling. And, then you got these types of scenarios. So,
is that also China?
Well, there's all sorts of countries, certainly not just China, that's for sure. There's a whole bunch of countries doing stuff that they shouldn't. So I think, being able to monitor that is a big plus. And we've so far been getting some pretty good signals from people in government that we're talking to saying, hey, we would love to have this capability, because really the only choice you've got at the moment is satellites that buzz across the sky, very low resolution. You can't even see what's going on with those vessels. We're close enough, you can actually see exactly what's going on there. But the other thing is having low flying aircraft, but that takes a whole lot of fuel, costs a lot. New Zealand has 4 Boeing P-8 aircraft, costs about $50,000 per hour to run those things. So this sort of platform really provides a whole new data layer that is just not possible.
Interesting. Yeah. And do those ships, do they know that you're monitoring them? Do you have capability to see that? It
was pretty hard to see an aircraft, 20 kilometers high. Yeah, I mean, I think, missiles typically don't even get to that height. So I think it'll be pretty hard to detect, and it's not like it's a big chunk of metal that gets a big radar blip, where a composite material, the current Mark I is only 40 kgs. It's a very
Wow,
very
it's
light
pretty
heavy.
light.
Yeah, I guess I think it'd be pretty hard for them to.
And is it the real time communication?
Yeah, I mean, what
Interesting.
basically, oh yeah, I can command and control systems need to basically pilot the aircraft. It is on autopilot, but obviously we're tracking
Did
exactly what.
I see? I think we actually visited Kea when we were down in Christchurch a few weeks ago, and I think there was a video, right, Henrik? That was Kea that we
No,
did.
that was Dawn,
That was
Dawn
oh
Aerospace.
Don. Oh right.
It's different.
Okay,
Yeah.
different company. Okay, but yeah, I
Yeah,
was gonna say.
they're a great company. They're doing amazing stuff there as well. So, yeah, Christchurch is really lucky to have them doing all their fantastic work.
I remember. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember they would launch their like planes on a car. Like there'd be they'd be sitting on a car and go and then sort of let it. Is that how you guys launch as well?
That was us. Were you part of the
Oh,
4x4 trip?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you saw us out. We were actually flying from Tafaki.
That was yeah.
Yep. So yeah, you saw us out there that day. Which I was actually away that day. I was on my honeymoon with Mrs. Rocket.
Nice, congratulations. Yeah, I missed that part. I think I was at dawn in the morning, but yeah, maybe an interesting point. Like there's a lot of companies now in kind of aerospace, space in general in New Zealand. Do you think New Zealand has some sort of advantage for these types of companies being built there?
I think there's a bunch of niches that we can zoom into. I'd really like to see New Zealand turn into a test bed for aerospace technology. We've got big ocean right on our doorstep and a low population density, low air traffic, generally pretty favourable conditions to do a lot of this testing. If you go to the Northern Hemisphere, very congested, very high population. So yeah, I'd love to see more countries bring their projects down here. We can do a lot of that cool testing, and if we can, get our government aligned with that to make it easy for people to go on that regulatory pathway and improve their technology here, it could bring in a lot of money.
Interesting. And what about the other applications, Mark? You mentioned what did you atmospheric monitoring? Was that one of them? And then what else?
Yeah, so for Kea Aerospace, Earth observation, where we've got multispectral cameras that kind of like giving Google Maps type images, plus infrared, ultraviolet, which basically allows you to do more analysis beyond the kind of normal spectrum of what humans see. We can actually look at plant health, and we can look at hotspots for fires, etc. So yeah, there's the Earth observation for multispectral, hyperspectral, and also, as I alluded to before, synthetic aperture radar, which works. It can look through clouds, it can look through weather, and that can be really useful for disaster response type stuff. So yeah, you've got Earth observation, then you've got telecommunications, where we can be like a cell phone tower in the sky. You know, instances like in Australia, they had a big weather event. It took out the electricity. People couldn't use their cell phone towers. People were told to evacuate. They couldn't fill up their cars for petrol because all the FPOS machines, everything was down. Basically, we could be a telecommunications cell phone tower in the sky, like that sort of scenario, so people can communicate.
Interesting. Have you thought about possibly providing that in Ukraine?
Well, at this stage, there's a lot of work that we can do in this part of the world first. I mean, it'd be years down the track before we would kind of look at, getting into Europe. But yeah, for now, we've got a lot of work that we can do in New Zealand, Australia, Pacific, Asia, Antarctica. So yeah, maybe on
I'm
the.
just thinking from like a demand point of view. Like I'm sure there's a lot of need and a lot of funding for, like kind of that kind of infrastructure in a in a place that's getting bombed all the time, where infrastructure is getting destroyed.
Yeah, well, I think there is a lot of monitoring there already with satellites and aircraft, and it's a pretty hot environment.
How do you feel about defense tech or defense, I guess, uses applications? Have you changed your perspective on that, or?
Yeah, well, I guess, like everyone, I sort of went from being a bit of a Tibetan monk, hippie, tree hugger type person to where I am today. It's kind of sad where, that the world is sort of going into a bit of a chaotic time. And the reality is, we've got bullies around, and you got to work out, are you going to run, or you're going to, stand up? And, it's a really difficult time. And, people at times like these, we kind of need to work it out. I mean, for me, I'm not so keen to work on the offensive side of the military capability, but I'm happy to work on the defensive capability. So if we are monitoring, we're keeping an eye on things. Yeah, but would I want to go and build bombs? I mean, for me, I'm personally, it just doesn't sort of fit quite where I am at now. But down the track, if if we are going into that sort of conflict situation. I mean, I never. I mean, look at the Ukraine. I mean, a lot of those people would never imagine where they are today, fighting on the front lines, defending their country. It's pretty rough for them. What they're going through, and I'm sure 10 years ago they wouldn't have ever imagined they'd be in that sort of situation. So I've learned
My
to never say never.
yeah, my best friend is from Ukraine, and he was a project manager like at an IT firm, and then he's now runs like a battalion of special forces units. So yeah, the circumstances may force things on you you didn't
Yeah,
expect.
exactly. Yeah, it's really sad.
How are
Yeah,
you?
but it's interesting to see that transition. We had another founder on the podcast just a few weeks ago, which may have already aired or will air in the next few weeks, who had a very similar transition, a kind of being, a pacifist and then realizing that the world is a much more dangerous place than it used to be 10 years ago. And now thinking about how his company can actually be on the defense side or, at least part of the infrastructure that's needed in a conflict situation.
Mm.
This is David from Foundry Lab. They're not. I don't know if you're familiar with that company. Based in Wellington, but they don't. I mean, they don't do anything related to defense at all. I basically a foundry, right? A prototyping platform for creating metal parts, right? But there's just a lot. Like the demand is from the defense side and the U.S. Defense Department and things like that. And he also had to make a choice around like, do I go down that? And then obviously there's the commercial aspect of it, which is where the money is. But also it's like he I think the way he said, kind of put it is like he's like, I kind of was like kind of naive, right? I didn't realize that everything that I had here in New Zealand was a function of just the U.S. defense umbrella. Like if that kind of goes away and like all of a sudden, China can bully us around or someone else can bully us around, like, that's not actually going to allow us to keep the same lifestyle and same kind of like,
Exactly. Yeah.
country that we had.
Complacent when you do have someone looking out for your back. But if that person or country is no longer looking out for you, you got some tough questions to answer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, what are your thoughts on the whole? I mean, now you're seeing all kinds of. I mean, I think you initially kind of saw the last kind of vestige of the Soviet Union, and that kind of the world was mostly a very like cohesive and safe place, right? Backed by sort of U.S. security guarantees. But now you're starting to see that fall apart with Trump and him kind of like being more transactional these relationships, and China's kind of on the rise, and there's now this rivalry. How are you seeing the world? How are you seeing New Zealand's role in that?
Yeah, I think we've got to navigate that very, very carefully. Yeah, I think we do need to invest a little bit more into our defensive budgets and just have a better game plan. With our biggest trading partners, US and China, potentially aren't going to get on so well soon. And we just need to have the right game plan. And I think that what has happened before is probably not what's going to happen in the future. So I think we really need to open up a conversation with the New Zealanders. It's not just something politicians should decide and then we end up going that direction. I think this is something New Zealanders should be really debating a lot more and talking about. And I'm not sure what that looks like, but I think a lot of my generation, particularly, very proud of the nuclear-free moment where David Lange announced to the world that we're nuclear-free. That's become an integral part of being a Kiwi. Most of us really, really love that. But yeah, I mean, going forward, what are some of the sort of key aspects of our identity that we really want to hold on to? And I would hope nuclear-free would be part of that future.
Mm-hmm.
But what else is there that we need to think about? Do we just try and get on with everyone and be a target
Switzerland.
that's not worth? Yeah, well, we can't really be Switzerland. I mean, Switzerland had a lot of military capability. They had a lot of the world's finances. They decades and decades building up massive infrastructure for defence, and they make it quite unpalatable for people to invade them because their money is there. So we can't be Switzerland. Switzerland can be Switzerland. New Zealand doesn't have that to offer.
Interesting. So, what do you think about it? What is what's New Zealand's kind of what's the analogy or like, what do you see kind of the future for New Zealand?
Yeah. I mean, either we pick a team or we try and get on with everyone on that basis. But yeah, I don't know. Again, I think it's a conversation some smart geopolitical type people need to put out there into the public domain, and we need to really talk more about it.
Makes sense. You kind of seeing kind of the whole evolution of the New Zealand tech ecosystem. I mean, you were there from the very beginning, right? Kind of seeing it to where it is today, and New Zealand becoming a leader. And it's like, I think, one of the top 5 countries in the world in terms of like aerospace, in terms of capabilities and what's possible. I mean, Rocket Lab is like the biggest or second biggest satellite launch provider in the world, from what I understand. And obviously, you have Kea and you have Dawn and you have many other companies. Kind of that talent. Do you feel like kind of where's that part of New Zealand going? Do you feel like it can sort of become, I think, was it Paul Callahan who had this like idea of like 100 whatever like really big businesses that each like could actually, like, if you just have like $100 billion companies, you can just not rely on primary industries as much.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Rocket Lab is one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think aerospace is a big part of the future. As I mentioned before, we've got those great industries such as winemaking, boat building, filmmaking. Aerospace is emerging as that, and we're getting a real willingness from government to put aerospace in the strategy. We've got a minister for space. We're moving in the right direction. We're getting connected with investors. We really need to incubate the aerospace startups and make sure we can connect them with smart money and help support those companies to get going. And we also need to think about our infrastructure strategy. Mark, you visited Te Whaki and you saw the National Aerospace Centre out there, and they've got a 1 kilometre runway and there's a special use airspace. That's the kind of infrastructure that New Zealand needs to invest in to enable companies like Dawn and Kia and other companies. We need that basic infrastructure to operate in this country. Otherwise, we'll have to skip off and find other countries that will accommodate us. So, yeah, I think we need to strategically think about what is the right infrastructure that needs to be built to enable those companies. And yeah, I think personally for me, I think the big thing that's missed out is trying to find the right people to support. Who are the next Peter Becks that are coming through. From my experience, you might have 100 engineers that graduate, but you'd be lucky, one every 100 or 200. So that has that kind of entrepreneurial spirit and zeal, make things happen kind of attitude. Those are the people we need to make sure they don't go off and work in Silicon Valley or wherever. We need to incubate them here in New Zealand and incubate the companies here in New Zealand. Rocket Lab is now Rocket Lab USA. It's even though we've got a bunch of jobs here, I think if Peter wanted to ship out to the US, a lot of those jobs will go. And we're lucky that he is a proud Kiwi that wants to keep the company here. But we need to, as a country, think about not just being an incubator of talent and companies that get taken offshore. We need to keep these people here, and we need to keep a lot of the ownership of the IP and the value here in New Zealand as well. So I think we've got some big questions to ask ourselves and answer.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, from your experience, kind of the companies yourself, backing companies, coming back and kind of, I mean, you're a very talented entrepreneur, having started successful companies in a lot of different industries. What would you say are like the key traits that make a good entrepreneur? What would you say was like super important? And are those things that are you just born with, or can you cultivate them?
Yeah, I take a more bespoke approach, entrepreneurship, and yeah, I think there's all sorts of different personalities, all different ways of approaching things. Yeah, you just got to. I think the key things we've got to look out for in entrepreneurs, the people that can kind of make things happen. People who have the drive and the determination and the toughness to keep pushing through. Being an entrepreneur is hard. You're always just banging your head against the wall, and you just got to keep pushing and keep trying to find the way around the problem. And be a problem solver.
So if you were to like put it in a sentence, sounds like what you said is got to just make it happen. Figure out a way to make it happen, no matter what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the reality is some people just get it done, and other people will tell you why they couldn't do it.
I like that. Yeah.
And what about what about New Zealand as a place for entrepreneurship? Right. On the one hand, I feel like having being so remote. I mean, kind of breeds this kind of number 8 wire mentality for a lot of folks. And I think historically you've had people just because you couldn't import a lot of things so far, you had to just build it, figure it out. I think that kind of gave New Zealand, I don't know if you feel that way, but kind of gave this scrappiness, figuring stuff out, figuring out problems. Do you feel like it's a uniquely sort of entrepreneurial country? And is there more that we could do, whether as sort of leaders in the space, as investors, maybe the government, like education? How do you sort of have more entrepreneurs? How do you have more companies? being built here? What's missing, if anything?
Yeah, I think we need to put more strategic thought into that. Again, as I said before, there could be, one engineer every 1 or 200 that are graduating that actually has that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. And I think a lot of engineers, they'll kind of look at what everyone else is doing. And, I get contacted by people all the time saying, hey, how do I get a job at Rocket Lab? Or how do I get a job at Dawn? How do I get a job at Kea? I don't get very many people saying, how do I start up my own rocket lab? No one's asking that question yet. Not many anyway. Right. Yeah, I think those are the types of people we need to kind of support
Yeah.
and encourage.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just want to look at another template and maybe they'll learn from that. But the great thing is those people will go and work at Rocket Lab, and then maybe 3-5 years later they'll go and start their own business up.
In my experience, I don't know what your experience, but like in my experience, I think it's harder to get a job than to like just start something on your own, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you do have a great idea, and I mean, there are a lot of really great incubator options at universities these days. So yeah, if you do have kind of half of an interesting idea, at the very least, you're going to learn a lot going through that entrepreneurial journey and working out how it all fits together.
Maybe to close the loop on Kea. So we talked about Earth observation, telecommunication. What was the third pillar?
Atmospheric testing.
Atmospheric testing. Okay. And who would be a customer?
People that want to put stuff up into the stratosphere that yeah, I mean, up there you're -50, -60 degrees Celsius, 10% of the air density. There's whole different particles up there. So there could be all sorts of atmospheric analysis kind of stuff. The reality is you can't actually stay up there at the moment. There's only a few platforms that can do it. You've got balloons, and they'll sort of go up and down, and it's kind of hard to control where they are in the atmosphere. Then you've got like a U-2 spy plane or the ER-2 science equivalent of that. There's a few high altitude sort of aircraft, but they can't be up there for very long, and they're very expensive. So yeah, with our sort of solar powered aircraft, that can be a really good way to do certain testing. And maybe you want to test something before it goes to space, and you want to put it into a tough environment, and then test it before it goes to space. So there's all sorts of atmospheric testing type scenarios that it can be useful for.
Okay, cool, super interesting. Yeah, I think, Mark, do you have any other questions?
No, I mean, I think we covered quite a lot of ground, Mark. I mean, I appreciate, and yeah, I mean, I think maybe just as a last kind of maybe question, piece of advice. We hope to inspire kind of the next generation of Kiwi and maybe Aussie entrepreneurs to create really groundbreaking innovation from down under. And so I'm curious if you have any advice or any if you were sort of like 18, 19, 22 today, right? And you have a lot of things that are very different from when you grew up. You have social media, you're very connected to the world. You have Gen AI. Every single person can now build an application that previously took like hundreds and hundreds of software engineers. You can build it in like an hour just by like talking to an AI coding agent. What kind of advice would you give to folks in this kind of environment? They're looking to realize their full potential.
Yeah, for me, it's just been committing to learning, committing to being a better version of myself. And you don't need to know everything. If you find something that really excites you, that's, to me, that is the key thing. If you find a concept that you just love, then try and pursue it.
Wow.
And if you combine that with trying to incrementally improve each day, each week, keep learning, but find something that puts a fire in your belly and makes you want to contribute.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, for you, that's definitely space, as we can tell from this conversation. And yeah, we're super excited for you too.
Do you want to go to Mars?
Probably not Mars. I mean, I think it would be pretty cold and dismal there. I mean, maybe if there's a colony set up, I wouldn't mind visiting. But I think those first frontier explorers that are going to go there, they're going to have a pretty rough time. And The Martian, that's a great book, The Martian, and the film is pretty cool as well. And yeah, I mean, if you want to eat potatoes and all the stuff that he had to put on those potatoes to grow them, it's going to be a pretty tough kind of scenario. But I think a lot of people don't realize that aerospace technology helps us here on Earth, and by virtue of living in space, you're living in a sustainable environment. And just in the same way that the Apollo program developed all these super cool technologies, that's the same thing is happening now with the modern aerospace industry, and it's helping to make a difference in people's lives. And I think a lot of people think, oh, what's the point of sending out rockets and doing all this stuff? But it actually does create really important technology that people will use on this planet. So yeah, I think that's one key thing from an aerospace perspective. We need to kind of keep putting the messaging out there just to really reinforce how important it is for our future.
What about you, like personally with Kea? Like, what's your kind of vision 5-10 years from now? What do you hope Kea is at, and you personally?
Yeah, we see ourselves as an Australasian company. We're starting off in Christchurch in New Zealand with manufacturing and flight testing. You know, we're starting to develop in Australia. Ultimately, we'll be doing a lot more flying from Australia because it's a great place to fly from the continent as opposed to being on the windy coast. So yeah, we'll be having a fleet of aircraft based out there. Our software team will probably be based in Australia.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, we'll have a fleet of aircraft flying around New Zealand and Australia, and then moving into the Pacific and Asia. And yeah, basically we want to be leaders in stratospheric flight operations and data acquisition.
Do you want to just focus on the region, or do you see yourself kind of going global?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a big job for us to do that. But yeah, certainly longer term, we want to be, world leaders in stratospheric operations. So we can basically pay the bills and get good revenue streams operating in New Zealand and Australia. But yeah, the big opportunity really comes when we're moving into the Northern Hemisphere.
What do you? Sorry, one last thing that I just thought of, which was just you have kids, right? What do you kind of tell your kids, or what do you advise your kids to do? How do you sort of inspire them? Are they interested in space? Are they interested in video games, or what are they into?
Yeah, well, my son is living my dream life. He's at University of Canterbury, his second year, doing aerospace engineering. Yeah, initially, I don't know if he was that enthusiastic, but I just sort of kind of chipped away at him, saying, "Hey, super cool." So yeah, my son is having a great time there, getting involved with projects there at University of Canterbury. My daughter's a few years behind, so not quite sure where she's at. And the reality is, when I was in my teenage years, it took me quite a while to kind of work out from being a Buddhist monk to being a chef to different professions. Sometimes it takes a while to find what really resonates, and it can take years before you really find what it is that excites you.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, we're excited to hear about how it went on the space trip in May, and thank you so much for coming on. And we're excited to follow your journey from here on.
Yeah, great to talk to you guys. Thanks, Hendrik. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for your time, Mark. Thank you for tuning in to TechMates. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with friends. We'll be back soon with more stories of Kiwi and Aussie founders reshaping the future and disrupting down under. Until next time, keep dreaming big and daring to disrupt.